Hello, channel family. What I'm about to tell you today changed my life forever, and I need to share it because I know many of you have been through something similar. It's a story about faith, betrayal, and a kind of justice that only God could orchestrate. I hope by the end you'll understand why I did what I did, and perhaps find strength in my journey. This isn't just my story. It's a testament to how the truth, no matter how buried, always finds its way to the light. It's a heavy burden to carry, but sharing it feels like a necessary step towards full healing. Today, you'll see how I, Michael Thorne, a 48-year-old priest, meticulously exposed the corrupt treasurer who framed me, publicly shaming him and clearing my name in the very church that cast me out. For years, I served St. Jude's Parish with all my heart, believing in its sacred mission and the goodness of its people. I poured my life into that community, comforted the sick, married the young, and buried the old. My faith was my anchor, my calling, something I thought no man could ever take from me, but I was wrong. The betrayal cut deeper than any knife. The moment it all crumbled was during a church council meeting, a place usually filled with prayer and planning. Robert Maxwell, our trusted treasurer, stood before everyone, tears streaming down his face, painting me as a greedy hypocrite. He presented what looked like meticulously fabricated financial records, accusing me, Father Michael, of embezzling the church's tithe. The sheer audacity, the cold-blooded lie, hit me like a physical blow. I watched in disbelief as the faces of my parishioners, my friends, turned from love to utter disgust and suspicion in an instant. The judgment was swift and brutal. I was immediately stripped of my priestly duties, publicly defrocked in a humiliating ceremony that felt like a public execution of my soul. Imagine losing everything you are, everything you've dedicated your life to, in a single, gut-wrenching moment. Excommunicated, cast out, my life's devotion reduced to ashes before the very flock I had nurtured. My initial reaction was profound shock, a despair so deep it felt like a physical wound, but beneath the grief, a cold, righteous anger began to simmer, fueled by the sheer injustice of it all. They took my sacred calling, my home, my reputation, and my purpose. They left me an outcast, scorned by those I once served with unwavering devotion. The weight of that betrayal, the feeling of being utterly abandoned by both man and, for a time, even God, was almost unbearable. But even in that darkness, a tiny spark of resolve ignited. I knew, deep in my bones, that I could not let this stand. Listen to my story to the end, and tell me, what would you have done in my place? Imagine standing before the very people who condemned you, watching as the truth unravels, exposing the villain who stole your life. My name is Michael Thorne, and at 48 I lived through that moment. It was a long, hard road to get there, but seeing justice served in St. Jude's Parish, the place that cast me out, was a victory carved from years of pain. Listen to my story to the end, and tell me, what would you have done in my place? That day, when my world shattered, is burned into my memory. It was a regular church council meeting, filled with familiar faces, a place I considered sacred. We were discussing the parish budget, routine stuff, until Robert Maxwell, our trusted treasurer. The world I knew simply evaporated. One moment, I was Father Michael, a man of God, serving a flock I loved. The next, I was nobody, a pariah, stripped of everything. The defrocking ceremony wasn't just a formality. It was a public execution of my very soul, a spectacle designed to shatter me. I remember the cold silence in the church, the averted eyes, and the chilling finality of the words that condemned me. It felt like being buried alive, watching everyone mourn a life that wasn't truly dead, but utterly destroyed. My home, the rectory, became a place I was no longer welcome. I had to pack my few belongings, mostly books and a worn crucifix, into a single duffel bag. Every item I touched felt heavy with lost memories, with the life that had been snatched away. I wasn't just losing a house. I was losing the sanctuary where I had found solace, where I had studied Scripture, where I had prepared countless sermons. It was a physical displacement that mirrored the spiritual void opening inside me, a stark reminder of my new, unwelcome reality. The shame was a suffocating blanket, heavy and ever-present. It wasn't just the humiliation of public accusation. It was the sting of betrayal from people I had trusted implicitly. Everywhere I looked, I saw judgment, real or imagined. Isolation quickly became my closest companion. The phone stopped ringing, the invitations ceased, and the friendly nods in the street turned into hurried glances away. I was alone, utterly and profoundly, with only my shattered thoughts for company, questioning everything I believed. My faith, once an unshakable fortress, crumbled under the weight of this injustice. How could God allow this? How could He let His servant be so cruelly maligned, so utterly abandoned? I grappled with dark questions, doubts that gnawed at my very core. Prayer, which had always been my lifeline, felt hollow, my words echoing in an empty room. It was a spiritual wilderness, a barren landscape where hope struggled to find even the smallest patch of fertile ground. The initial wave of immediate abandonment was brutal. People who had once sought my counsel, who had shared their deepest secrets, now crossed the street to avoid me. Their silence was louder than any shouts, a clear message that I was no longer one of them. It was a swift, harsh lesson in how quickly loyalty can dissolve when fear and suspicion take root, especially when fueled by a charismatic liar like Robert Maxwell. I saw their faces, once filled with trust, now twisted by disgust. My neighbors, many of whom I had known for decades, suddenly became strangers. Their doors remained closed, their curtains drawn. The casual greetings that once filled my days vanished, replaced by an uncomfortable void. I understood, intellectually, that they were swayed by Maxwell's performance, but emotionally, it felt like a personal rejection from every single person I had ever cared for. The familiar streets of St. Jude's, once comforting, now felt like a hostile territory. The whispers followed me like a shadow, even when I tried to escape them. I could feel the weight of their judgment, the unspoken accusations hanging in the air. There goes Father Michael, the embezzler. How could he betray us like that? Their eyes, when they dared to meet mine, were filled with a mixture of pity and contempt, a searing cocktail that burned away any remnants of my old self. It was a constant, gnawing reminder of my destroyed reputation. Leaving town became my only option, a forced exile from everything I had ever known. I drove away from St. Jude's, the rearview mirror reflecting a life I could no longer claim. The anonymity of a new city was a double-edged sword, a relief from the constant scrutiny, but also a profound loneliness. I was a ghost, a man without a past, forced to invent a new identity just to exist, to find some way to blend into the faceless crowds. Building a new life from scratch proved to be an overwhelming challenge. Without references, without a clean record, my priestly training was useless. I took whatever work I could find, mostly menial labor, jobs that paid just enough to keep a roof over my head and food on my table. The contrast with my former life, a life of spiritual guidance and community leadership, was stark and often heartbreaking. Each task felt like a further descent into obscurity. I cleaned floors, washed dishes, and stacked shelves. These were honest jobs, but they were also a constant, grinding reminder of how far I had fallen. My hands, once clasped in prayer or offering communion, now scrubbed grime from public toilets. The physical exhaustion was immense, but the emotional toll was far heavier. It was a humbling experience, forcing me to confront my own pride and the harsh realities of a world that had no place for a disgraced priest. The constant fear of being recognized was a heavy burden. Every new face, every unexpected glance sent a jolt of anxiety through me. I changed my appearance, grew a beard, dressed in nondescript clothes, trying to erase the image of Father Michael from my reflection. But the fear remained, a persistent whisper that my past could catch up to me at any moment, tearing away the fragile peace I desperately tried to build. My new life felt like a constant hiding. Then came the moment that truly broke me. I was working as a janitor in a bustling government building, pushing my cart down a long corridor. It was a Tuesday afternoon, gray and unremarkable, until I heard voices that struck a chilling chord in my memory. 2 women, parishioners from St. Jude's, were walking towards me, laughing. My blood ran cold. There was no escape. The hallway was too narrow, and my cart too cumbersome. "Well, look who it is," one of them sneered, her voice dripping with disdain. "Father Michael, trading the altar for a mop. Guess God has a funny way of punishing the greedy." The other woman giggled, and they both stared at me with open contempt. My face burned with humiliation. I tried to look away, to disappear, but their words pierced through me, confirming every fear I had carried. Their cruel laughter echoed in the sterile hallway. Their words were like daggers, slicing through the thin veneer of my new identity. They spoke loudly enough for others to hear, pointing and whispering. "He tried to steal from the church, you know." The public ridicule, the sheer audacity of their malice, was almost unbearable. I felt utterly exposed, my past ripped open for strangers to gawk at. Every fiber of my being screamed in protest, but I could do nothing but stand there, a silent target. In that moment, I felt utterly stripped bare, not just of my collar, but of my dignity, my worth, my very humanity. Their words weren't just an insult. They were a declaration that I was worthless, a failure, a disgrace. The shame was so profound it felt like a physical pain, a crushing weight that stole my breath. It was as if every step I had taken to rebuild myself had been for nothing, that I was forever branded by their lies. The incident cost me that janitorial job. My supervisor, a kind but nervous man, told me later that it was for the best. He couldn't risk controversy in a public building. Another defeat, another door slammed shut. It wasn't just losing income. It was losing the small sense of stability I had managed to cling to. Each setback chipped away at my spirit, eroding my resolve, pushing me closer to the edge of utter despair. Financial hardship became a constant companion, a gnawing worry that never left me. Every penny counted. Every meal was carefully planned. I learned the true meaning of scarcity, of making do with almost nothing. It was a life far removed from the comfortable existence of a priest, a stark, brutal education in survival. The struggle was relentless, a daily reminder of the life that had been stolen from me, and the one I was now forced to endure. Meanwhile, from the snippets of news I occasionally heard, Robert Maxwell continued to thrive. His reputation, far from being tarnished, seemed to have been enhanced by his courageous act of exposing me. He was hailed as a pillar of the community, a man of integrity. The injustice of it all burned like a fire in my gut. He prospered while I withered, a cruel twist of fate that fueled a quiet, smoldering rage within me. There were times, many times, when I considered giving up entirely. The darkness was so pervasive, the despair so deep, that the thought of simply ceasing to exist felt like a tempting escape. What was the point? My name was ruined, my life shattered, my God seemingly silent. I was adrift, a broken man in a sea of indifference, with no compass and no shore in sight. The weight of it all was almost too much to bear, but something, a tiny flicker deep within me, held me back from the abyss. It wasn't logic or strength. It was an ingrained sense of purpose, a whisper of the man I used to be. I remembered the scriptures, the stories of Job, of suffering and perseverance. Even in my darkest hour, the core of my Christian faith, though tested and bruised, refused to be extinguished completely. There was a faint echo of God's presence, a tiny anchor in the storm. Slowly, painfully, a new realization began to dawn. This injustice, this monstrous lie, could not stand. It wasn't just about me, it was about the truth, about the integrity of the church I had served. I couldn't simply fade away and let Maxwell's lie become history. There was a moral imperative, a divine call, to expose the darkness, to bring light to what had been hidden. This wasn't just my story. It was a battle for righteousness. The anger, once a chaotic, destructive force, began to solidify into a cold, unwavering resolve. It wasn't the kind of anger that sought petty revenge, but a righteous indignation, a determination to uncover the truth, no matter how long it took or what it cost. I realized that my spiritual strength, though dormant, was still there, waiting to be rekindled, ready to be channeled into a singular, unwavering purpose. I would fight back, not with violence or malice, but with intelligence, with patience, and with a steadfast belief in the power of truth. This wasn't about personal vendetta. It was about restoring what was lost, about clearing my name and honoring the sacred institution that had been defiled. Even from the depths of my despair, a plan, vague and distant, began to form in the quiet corners of my mind. That day, as I sat alone in my small, lonely room, nursing my wounds, I made a quiet promise to myself. I would not let this lie define me. I would not let Maxwell win. The road ahead would be long and arduous, but I would find a way. The seed of determination, planted in the fertile ground of injustice, began to sprout, signaling the slow, arduous journey towards an unveiling that would shake St. Jude's to its core. I was adrift, yes, but even in the deepest storms, a sailor looks for a star. My star came not from the heavens directly, but from an unexpected earthly source. Years after my exile, when I had almost forgotten the sound of my own name, a letter arrived. It was thin, unthreatening, tucked away in a pile of junk mail, but the name on the return address, though faded and barely legible, made my heart stop. Robert Maxwell, the man who had ruined me. My hands trembled as I opened it, half expecting another blow, another twist of the knife. But what I found inside was not an insult, but a confession. A dying man's final act, written in shaky script riddled with remorse. Maxwell was on his deathbed, consumed by guilt, and he finally admitted everything. Every lie, every fabricated record, every tear he shed that day in the council meeting, all of it was a performance, a cruel, calculated deception. He confessed to fabricating the entire embezzlement scheme, not just to cover his own substantial financial misdeeds, but for an even darker reason. He wanted to secure a powerful, lucrative position for his ambitious son, Daniel Maxwell, within the church's financial council. The words hit me with the force of a tidal wave, washing away the shame and replacing it with a searing clarity. It wasn't just about money. It was about a dynasty built on lies. The letter wasn't just an admission of guilt. It was a treasure map to the truth. It contained a hidden ledger entry, a specific code that unlocked a web of deceit, and a cryptic clue pointing to an even more extensive, long-term fraud that had bled St. Jude's dry for years. This wasn't just about clearing my name anymore. It was about tearing down a corrupt empire, protecting the very church they claimed to serve. This deathbed confession, this unexpected gift from the man who had destroyed my life, was my ultimate vindication. It was the spark that reignited my purpose, the solid ground beneath my feet after years of sinking sand. It was the proof I needed, the undeniable truth that would finally set me free. But I knew proof alone wasn't enough. I needed to understand how to use it, how to fight fire, but with God as my guide. During those long, lonely years of exile, while scrubbing floors and stacking shelves, my mind was never idle. I had always been a keen observer, a meticulous student of Scripture, but now I turned that intellect to a different kind of study. I devoured books on forensic accounting, spent countless hours learning about digital security, and immersed myself in the intricate legal loopholes of corporate and religious institutions. I transformed myself, piece by painful piece, into a shrewd and formidable investigator. Every night, after exhausting days of manual labor, I would pore over online courses, free resources, anything I could get my hands on. It was a silent, personal crusade, driven by the burning desire for truth. My hands might be rough from work, but my mind was sharper than ever, a quiet weapon being forged in the shadows. Robert Maxwell, in his arrogance, never imagined I possessed such resilience. He saw a gentle priest, easily broken, easily discarded. He underestimated my quiet strength, my unwavering commitment to what was right. He certainly never considered that I would dedicate years to understanding the very systems he exploited, turning his own tools of deception into instruments of his undoing. He thought he had buried me. And Daniel, his ambitious son, was no different. He walked in his father's footsteps, believing himself untouchable, surrounded by the same blind loyalty and unchecked power. They saw me as a relic of the past, a disgraced figure, certainly not someone capable of mounting a sophisticated counterattack. That underestimation, that utter disdain, was perhaps their greatest weakness, a crack in their armor I intended to exploit. But the most profound strength I found wasn't in ledgers or legal texts. It was in my faith. My connection to Jesus Christ, though tested and bruised, never truly broke. It became my moral compass, my unshakable inner strength. This wasn't about petty revenge. It was about divine purpose, about bringing light to darkness, just as the Scriptures taught. My pursuit of truth was guided by God, not by bitterness. For there is nothing hidden that will not be disclosed, and nothing concealed that will not be brought out into the open. Luke chapter 8, verse 17, echoed in my mind daily. This wasn't just a verse, it was a promise, a divine mandate. It gave my newfound skills a higher purpose, transforming my personal quest into a mission of spiritual justice. I wasn't just Michael Thorne, I was an instrument of God's truth. The combination of Maxwell's confession, my painstakingly acquired skills, and my rekindled faith created a potent, unstoppable force. I had the motive, the means, and now the divine conviction. The game had changed. The pieces were slowly falling into place, revealing a path forward that was both intelligent and spiritually guided. I knew then, with absolute certainty, that their reign of deception would soon end. The quiet obscurity I had embraced for so long was about to become my greatest asset. Nobody would suspect the disgraced, forgotten priest of planning such a meticulous, calculated return. I was invisible, a ghost, and that invisibility would allow me to move unhindered, gathering information, building my case, brick by painstaking brick, until the foundation of their lies crumbled. I wasn't seeking reconciliation or forgiveness from them. I was seeking justice, pure and unadulterated, the kind of justice that cleanses, that restores, that honors the sacred space they had defiled. My heart was no longer consumed by raw anger, but by a calm, resolute determination. The time for sorrow was over. The time for action, guided by truth and faith, had finally arrived. My path was clear. I would return, not as Father Michael, but as Mr. Thorne, a man with a new identity, a new set of skills, and an old, unwavering purpose. The unveiling of St. Jude's was not just inevitable, it was a sacred duty, and the Maxwells in their hubris would never see it coming, blinded by their own deceit and their underestimation of a man they thought they had utterly destroyed. Before I delve into the intricate details of how this long-awaited justice finally unfolded, it's incredibly important that you take a moment to subscribe to this channel and generously leave a like on this video. Your simple actions of subscribing and liking are crucial. They significantly help YouTube's algorithm recommend this powerful and inspiring story to a much wider audience. By doing so, you become an active part of our mission, helping us spread the profound messages of the gospel through these real-life testimonies of faith and perseverance. So please, I earnestly ask for your support. Help us in this truly noble cause, reaching hearts and minds with stories that truly matter. The night of the annual fundraising gala arrived, a grand affair at St. Jude's, buzzing with the town's elite. Daniel Maxwell, radiating confidence, was poised to unveil his ambitious expansion project, a testament to his perceived success. I, now known as Mr. Thorne, blended into the background, a silent observer in a tailored suit. My heart pounded not with fear, but with a quiet, burning resolve. This was the moment years of pain and painstaking preparation would finally culminate. The stage was set for a truth to be unveiled. As Daniel began his smooth introduction, my fingers, steady and precise, worked discreetly on a hidden tablet. Sarah, bless her innocent heart, had granted me the temporary remote access I needed for technical support earlier that day. A single tap, a silent command, and the carefully crafted presentation on the giant projection screens flickered, then vanished. A collective gasp rippled through the elegant crowd, followed by an uneasy murmur of confusion. In its place, a cascade of raw, undeniable financial data filled the screens, stark white text on a black background. Complex spreadsheets, account numbers, and transaction dates scrolled rapidly, too fast for most to comprehend, but clear enough for the trained eye. Daniel froze at the podium, his confident smile dissolving into a look of pure, unadulterated horror. He knew instantly what was happening, his carefully constructed facade crumbling before everyone. Then, a specific ledger entry, highlighted in angry red, paused on the screen. It was the cryptic clue from Robert Maxwell's confession, now linked to Daniel's active accounts, revealing decades of systematic siphoning from the church's building fund. The figures showed millions, not thousands, funneled into shell corporations, the same pattern his father had used. The truth, ugly and undeniable, was laid bare for every wealthy donor and loyal parishioner to witness. A murmur grew into a roar as the realization dawned on the crowd. People pointed, whispered, and some gasped aloud as the full weight of the deception hit them. The local investigative journalist, whom I had discreetly tipped off, was already live-streaming the entire event on his phone, his commentary hushed but impactful. The world was watching, seeing the truth unfold in real time, right there in the hallowed halls of St. Jude's. Panic erupted. Security guards rushed towards the screens, but it was too late. The damage was done. Moments later, 2 plainclothes officers, already present due to my anonymous tip to authorities, moved swiftly towards Daniel. He was arrested, right there, publicly disgraced, his empire of lies collapsing around him in a spectacular, humiliating fall. His face, once beaming, was now a mask of utter despair and disbelief. I watched from the back, a quiet observer, as the chaos unfolded. No triumphant shouts, no grand speeches from me. Just a deep, profound sense of peace washing over my soul. My name, though unspoken, was implicitly cleared in that moment, my dignity restored by the undeniable light of truth. Daniel Maxwell, the architect of my ruin, stood exposed and broken, exactly where he belonged. God's justice had finally prevailed.